The Mandalorians are known as one of the most feared warrior cultures in the galaxy. Because of this, their armor, their weapons, and their code have become symbols of strength and survival. Yet this reputation did not come from confidence. After barely surviving an ancient enemy, it was fear that reshaped their entire society around a single goal. Every tradition and every weapon can be traced back to that moment. When we examined their history using both Canon and Legends sources, a troubling pattern emerged. The systems meant to protect their world repeatedly failed when they mattered most. Their customs allowed outsiders to seize power. Their beliefs fractured unity at critical moments. What this history reveals is not a simple tale of conquest or defeat, but how a culture built for survival nearly destroyed itself. The full truth behind the Mandalorians is far darker than most fans realize. The Mandalorians spent centuries preparing for the wrong enemy. Every weapon they built, every defense they created was designed to fight one threat. When the real danger finally came, none of it mattered. Mandalore was once a lush world filled with jungles, seas, and thriving life. Now, it is a harsh desert where survivors huddle beneath protective domes. Old conflicts, especially those against the Jedi, shaped both this landscape and the culture that rose from its ashes. The Mandalorians did not win their struggle against the Jedi. They survived at enormous cost. Star Wars Timelines shows how centuries of constant warfare turned the entire planet into a barren wasteland. The war with the Jedi scorched everything, turning a living world into dead terrain that needed domed cities just to endure. Survivors gathered around whatever water sources remained. Eventually, everyone retreated into biodome cities. The old capital of Keldabe fell into ruins, and a new domed capital called Sundari rose in its place. From that moment on, their entire society shifted toward one purpose: making sure no enemy could threaten them like that again. Armor forged from beskar can stop blaster bolts and even lightsaber strikes. Found only on Mandalore and its moon, Concordia, this rare metal became the heart of both their identity and their military power. Unlike almost every other material in the galaxy, beskar absorbs and deflects lightsaber energy. The wearer can survive direct hits. Din Djarin showed this when he fought Ahsoka Tano, blocking her lightsaber with his beskar vambraces. That would have been impossible with any other material. But beskar was just the start of their answer to the Jedi threat. In Legends continuity, Karen Travis's Republic Commando novels made beskar armor one of the Rasolnare, the 6 rules of their way of life. They called it Beskargam, iron skin. Sets passed through families of generations, each warrior adding their own marks while keeping what had kept their ancestors alive. The armor was not just protection, it was identity. Their vambraces packed everything needed to fight Force users: grappling lines, paralyzing darts, and flamethrowers that could not be blocked by a lightsaber. Jango Fett proved this on Geonosis, forcing even Mace Windu, one of the Order's greatest masters, to retreat. Whipcord launchers trapped limbs long enough to strike, as Jango showed against Obi-Wan Kenobi on Kamino. Whistling birds, small beskar missiles that deploy up to 12 at once, track targets on their own. Nearly impossible to defend against, even for those who sense attacks before they come. They even built prisons for Force users. The Mandalorian Vault was a mobile prison made for Force-sensitive captives, locking them in place like a slab of carbonite. These vaults were used during the Old Wars to hold captured Jedi Knights, and many reportedly died in Mandalorian hands. The device froze prisoners completely, stopping them from using gestures or movements that might channel the Force. It also blocked all sound, keeping prisoners from sensing chances to escape. It worked even against someone as powerful as Maul, who was completely helpless inside one when Order 66 hit. Only Ahsoka saved him from death. Every piece of their arsenal existed because their ancestors feared what the Jedi could do. However, the Jedi were not the ones who brought Mandalore to ruin. That would come much later, and from an enemy who had no Force powers at all. The Great Purge came from the Empire using ordinary military power: TIE assault craft, stormtroopers, and probe droids. All that anti-Jedi technology proved useless against enemies who had no force powers to counter. Generations of preparation, and they were defenseless when it mattered most. But the greatest failure was not found in their weapons. The Mandalorians also created a rule that was supposed to guarantee strong leadership. Instead, it guaranteed bloodshed and eventually handed their throne to an enemy. During those centuries of conflict with the Jedi, one Mandalorian did something no one expected. He joined the Jedi Order, and his name was Tarre Vizsla. The weapon he forged would shape their politics for the next 1,000 years. Tarre Vizsla was the only Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order. Star Wars timelines places this around 1050 BBY, but how it happened remains unknown. Some think he was an orphan with no clan to raise him. Others believe the Jedi hoped to bridge the gap between two peoples who had been enemies for centuries. During his training, Tarre built a lightsaber unlike any other. The Darksaber had a flat, pointed black blade that crackled with white energy along its edges, looking more like a traditional sword than the round beams of normal lightsabers. He combined Jedi building methods with Mandalorian technology and style, creating a weapon that fused both cultures, just as Tarre himself bridged two peoples who had fought for so long. After leaving the Order, Tarre returned home and united his people. He became the Mandalore, sole ruler of all clans, and founded House Vizsla as the ruling family. Statues of him rose across their systems. He became the founding myth of modern Mandalore, proof that one of their own could master even the Force. But this achievement created a dangerous custom. Importantly, the blade only mattered when won through combat. It could not be given, inherited, or simply found. It had to be taken by defeating the previous owner in battle. This rule tied violence to Mandalorian power forever. When Tarre died, the Jedi kept this weapon in their temple on Coruscant as a valued relic. Some believe the Jedi wanted to study the unique blade. Others think they honored Tarre by keeping his work safe. Whatever their reasons, the Mandalorians saw this as theft of something that belonged to them. During the fall of the Old Republic, when open war had broken out, House Vizsla members broke into the Jedi Temple and stole the Darksaber back. Mandalorian protector Fen Rao later called this liberating the blade, a word that showed how deeply they felt about taking back what they saw as stolen heritage. House Vizsla then used it to conquer and unite the scattered clans, just as Tarre had done. Over the centuries, the weapon passed through many leaders, and combat-based succession became deeply rooted in their culture. The Darksaber became both a symbol of unity and a cause of bloodshed, as ambitious warriors fought to claim it through violence. By the Clone Wars era, it belonged to Tarre Vizsla, governor of Concordia and secret leader of Death Watch. He was Tarre's descendant and saw the weapon as his birthright, bragging that many Jedi had fallen to its edge since his ancestors took it back from the temple. A practice meant to ensure strong leaders instead ensured that anyone willing to kill could claim power, even outsiders who cared nothing for Mandalore itself. And once violence became the path to power, it did not stay contained. Before any outside enemy could destroy them, the Mandalorians nearly destroyed themselves. The same warrior spirit that had kept them alive for centuries now turned inward, splitting their society in two. The war's roots stretched back decades. The devastation from the Jedi conflict had created a deep divide that shaped their politics for generations. Some believe the only way to endure was by abandoning their warrior ways entirely. Others reached the opposite conclusion, that they needed to grow even stronger so no enemy could threaten them again. This split eventually exploded into civil war. The pacifist movement, known as the New Mandalorians, formed in Sundari. They wanted to channel their people's creativity into building rather than endless warfare. They expanded peaceful biocube cities across the planet's ruined surface and eventually became the majority. Around 42 BBY, Under a young woman named Satine Kryze, the new Mandalorians challenged the martial traditionalists who still held on to the old ways. The warrior clans refused to give up power peacefully. What followed was the Great Clan Wars. This brutal conflict lasted roughly from 41 BBY to 39 BBY and killed countless people on both sides. Among the dead was Duke Adonai Kryze, Satine's father, killed while defending their homeworld. The massive death toll became the main reason Satine committed herself so completely to pacifism for the rest of her life. She had seen firsthand what the cycle of violence did to her people and swore to break that cycle no matter the cost. The Jedi Order sent Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his young Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi to protect the future Duchess during the conflict. They spent an entire year on Mandalore, constantly hunted by rebel bounty hunters, always on the run, living hand to mouth, never knowing what the next day would bring. During this dangerous time, Obi-Wan and Satine fell deeply in love. Years later, Obi-Wan admitted to Anakin Skywalker that he would have left the Jedi Order entirely if Satine had asked him to stay. This showed just how deep his attachment to her was, an attachment that would later be used against him in the cruelest way possible. After the new Mandalorians won the Civil War, Satine became Duchess. The remaining martial traditionalists were exiled to the moon Concordia. Everyone assumed these exiled warriors would simply die out over time, as the moon's exhausted mines had nearly destroyed its forests and the land seemed unable to support life. Satine rebuilt her world over the next 20 years. Under her guidance, Mandalore thrived. A memorial to those who died on all sides was built in Sundari's Peace Park, and the planet joined the Galactic Senate while staying officially neutral in galactic conflicts. But the exiled warriors did not fade away. They quietly regrouped in the abandoned mines and formed a terrorist group called Death Watch under the secret command of Tarre Vizsla. Publicly, he served as the governor of Concordia and acted like a close ally of Duchess Satine. In truth, he hated everything she stood for and wanted to restore their warrior heritage by any means necessary. What made their existence even more tragic was the involvement of Satine's own sister. Bo-Katan became Tarre Vizsla's second-in-command and led an elite squad of female warriors called the Night Owls. The two sisters had chosen opposite paths. One embraced peace, while the other clung to warrior customs. Death Watch set up secret bases throughout Concordia's abandoned mines and built up supporters at all levels of society, creating a shadow network that could strike from anywhere at any time. Death Watch used terrorist tactics, including bombings, assassinations, and campaigns designed to destroy public faith in Satine's pacifist government. When Obi-Wan Kenobi came to investigate, he got too close to the truth. Tarre Vizsla tried to kill him personally using the Darksaber, revealing himself as the terrorist leader. Despite being exposed, Death Watch proved hard to stamp out. After their alliance with Count Dooku failed due to his betrayal, they simply retreated and waited for another chance. The Civil War had not ended. It had just gone underground. And in their desperation for allies, Death Watch was about to make a deal that would cost them everything. That chance came when Death Watch found a damaged shuttle drifting through space. The Mandalorians had created rules to keep themselves strong. Now, those very rules would be used against them by an enemy who understood exactly how to exploit them. Inside lay a badly wounded Darth Maul and his brother, Savage Opress, hurt from a recent battle with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Wike pirates. Tarre Vizsla and Maul discovered they shared a common enemy in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and their mutual hatred formed the base of a dangerous alliance. Bo-Katan, remembering how Dooku had betrayed Death Watch before, stayed wary of allying with another Force user, but she ultimately went along with Death Watch's choice to join forces with the Sith brothers. Maul proved to be a brilliant criminal mastermind. He created the Shadow Collective, an alliance of the galaxy's biggest criminal groups. He personally defeated the heads of Black Sun to bring them in. Then, added the Pike Syndicate and even parts of the Hutt clan to his growing criminal empire. Death Watch provided military muscle, and together, this combined force gave the terrorists the strength they had always lacked. Then, Maul set up a brilliant manipulation of public opinion. The Shadow Collective staged coordinated attacks on the planet, including strikes on the capital city of Sundari itself. These attacks were designed to appear overwhelming, creating problems that Satine's pacifist government simply could not handle. Then, as planned, Death Watch swooped in as heroes while the real government looked helpless. The grateful public embraced them as saviors. Tarre Vizsla publicly swore to work alongside Satine to protect their people. Behind closed doors, he immediately had her arrested and seized control of the government. Once the planet was secured, Tarre Vizsla betrayed Maul and tried to imprison both Sith brothers. This proved to be his final and fatal mistake. Maul easily escaped and challenged Tarre Vizsla for the throne. By their own customs, he had every right to do so. Tarre Vizsla had championed this very rule, the same one that justified his fight against the pacifist government. Now, someone who had no stake in Mandalore itself was now using it against them. What followed was one of the fiercest duels in Star Wars history. Maul wielded his red lightsaber while Vizsla used everything he had: the black blade, flamethrower, jetpack, and vambraces loaded with weapons. Both fighters used every tool in a battle that showed the best of both Sith and Mandalorian combat styles. Tarre Vizsla relied on every advantage his ancestors had built. Maul relied on rage and skill learned from Darth Sidious himself. Maul's Sith training proved better. He beheaded Tarre Vizsla with a single, merciless stroke and claimed the weapon for himself. By their own customs, he was now the rightful ruler. Bo-Katan Kryze and her Night Owls refused to accept an outsider as leader, saying that an outsider could never truly rule their people, no matter what their ways said. But many Death Watch members accepted Maul's victory as legitimate under their own laws, turning themselves into his super commandos with armor repainted in black and red to match Maul's Zabrak skin markings. The very symbol meant to guarantee strong command had handed their throne to a Sith. The practice Tarre Vizsla had used to justify his rebellion against the pacifists was now used to legitimize Maul's rule over the very people he had claimed to protect. Maul did not want Mandalore for its own sake. He wanted it because of one man, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Maul's entire takeover was never really about ruling the planet. It was about one thing only: making Obi-Wan Kenobi suffer. He had spent years in madness and agony after being cut in half by Obi-Wan on Naboo. When Mother Talzin restored his mind, all that pain turned into a single obsession with revenge. He knew about Obi-Wan's romantic history with Satine and understood that taking Mandalore would eventually draw Obi-Wan to him. Satine managed to send a distress signal back to the Jedi Council, and Maul allowed this because he knew exactly what would follow. Because of the planet's official neutrality, the Jedi had no right to step in. The Council could not approve a rescue mission, but Maul understood that Obi-Wan would come anyway, alone and without backup, because his feelings for Satine would override his duty to the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan snuck into Mandalore, freed Satine from prison, and tried to escape off-world with her. But Maul's forces caught them, shot down their transport, and captured them both. Maul brought them to the throne room of Sundari's royal palace, where he sat upon the throne with Death Watch troopers standing guard. When Obi-Wan was dragged before him, Maul taunted his old enemy about how his noble emotions had betrayed him. What followed became one of the most emotionally charged moments in Clone Wars history. Obi-Wan declared that Maul could kill him, but would never destroy him, that it takes strength to resist the dark side, and only the weak embrace it. Maul countered that the dark side was more powerful than Obi-Wan knew. When Obi-Wan pointed out that the Night Sisters had made the choice to join the dark side for Maul when he was just a child, Maul exploded in rage, screaming that he had suffered for years, thinking of nothing but Obi-Wan, nothing but this moment of vengeance. Then, Maul revealed the true cruelty of his plan. He had never intended to simply kill Obi-Wan. He wanted to make Obi-Wan share his pain, to experience the same agony that Maul had suffered for over a decade. Using the Force, Maul lifted Satine into the air and pulled her toward him, then drove the Darksaber through her body while forcing Obi-Wan to watch helplessly as Death Watch soldiers held him down. The weapon that symbolized Mandalorian rule was now being used to murder their rightful leader. As Satine lay dying on the cold floor, she used her final breath to tell Obi-Wan she loved him, that she had loved him always and always would. She passed in his arms while Maul watched with satisfaction. Rather than finish Obi-Wan afterward, Maul ordered him imprisoned to drown in his misery, wanting to stretch out his enemy's suffering. Obi-Wan was eventually rescued by Bo-Katan and her Night Owls, who had turned against Maul. In a painful twist, Obi-Wan realized Bo-Katan was Satine's sister, the same woman who had helped the terrorists who made Maul's takeover possible. Bo-Katan urged Obi-Wan to return to the Republic and report what had happened, declaring that Maul would die but Mandalore would survive, because Mandalore always survives. Maul's triumph did not last. His takeover created a disturbance in the Force sensed by his former master, Darth Sidious, who saw Maul as a potential rival to his own plans for galactic domination. Sidious traveled to Mandalore personally, killed Savage Opress, and defeated Maul, but spared him for later use. Maul would escape and return to rule through his Shadow Collective. When he did, Bo-Katan approached former Jedi Padawan Ahsoka Tano for help in defeating him. In 19 BBY, Ahsoka and clone commander Rex led a division of the 501st Legion alongside Bo-Katan's forces in what became known as the Siege of Mandalore, the final battle of the Clone Wars. Ahsoka captured Maul using a Mandalorian vault, but as she escorted him to Coruscant for trial, Order 66 was executed, and clone troopers turned on their Jedi commanders across the galaxy. Bo-Katan briefly became regent after the siege. The Republic she had called for help was now gone, replaced by the Galactic Empire. Though Mandalore had endured Maul, it was about to face something far worse. The Empire had plans that would make everything before seem merciful. By now, the Mandalorians had already torn themselves apart through civil war, terrorism, and a Sith takeover. They were weakened, divided, and exhausted. The Empire saw an opportunity. After the Clone Wars ended, Mandalore quickly became an occupied territory. The rise and fall of the Galactic Empire details how Bo-Katan was removed for refusing Imperial orders. She wanted her world to stay neutral and self-governed, but the Empire had no interest in their independence. The Empire backed Clan Saxon, led by Gar Saxon, in overthrowing Bo-Katan's government. Gar Saxon became viceroy and governor, serving as an imperial puppet ruler who kept control by working with the occupiers. The Empire built an Imperial academy on the planet to train soldiers using elite warrior techniques, and they began mining beskar for their own purposes. For years, the planet existed under this occupation. Loyalist clans like the Saxons supported the Empire, while others suffered under foreign rule. Among those trained at the academy was Sabine Wren of Clan Wren, part of House Vizsla. Brilliant and eager to prove herself, she threw herself into weapons development. During her time there, she designed something that would become a terrible irony. The arc pulse generator, nicknamed the Duchess after the pacifist leader Satine, was built to target beskar. It superheated the metal and instantly vaporized anyone wearing it, while leaving Imperial stormtroopers in their plastoid armor completely unharmed. The very technology that had protected them for generations would now be turned against them. Sabine built it as an academic challenge, eager to prove herself. She did not fully understand what the Empire planned to do with her creation until they began testing it on actual Mandalorians. When she realized the horror of what she had built, she sabotaged the prototype, tried to destroy the plans, and defected from the Empire. But the Empire managed to salvage and rebuild the weapon from her designs. The situation changed when House Wren rebelled against Clan Saxon, sparking yet another civil conflict. Sabine's mother, Countess Ursa Wren, killed Gar Saxon during this conflict. The rebel clans sought to unite under a new command that would oppose the Empire. Bo-Katan emerged as the natural choice, her past deeds earning her the loyalty of many clans, including Clan Vizsla. When Sabine presented her with the Black Blade, Bo-Katan became Mandalore and led renewed resistance against Imperial occupation. For a brief time, it seemed like they might break free, but the old customs created a fatal weakness. Bo-Katan had not won the blade through combat. She had been given it, and according to their rules, this meant her claim was not legitimate. Some believe this violation brought a curse unto the nation. What followed was devastating. The Empire realized they could never truly control the Mandalorian people. Every time they installed a puppet government, resistance emerged. Every time they crushed one rebel faction, another arose. The Mandalorians were simply too proud, too martial, and too committed to their own culture to ever live under someone else's rule. When control failed, the Empire chose an answer that left no room for survival. An officer of the Imperial Security Bureau led what became known as the Great Purge of Mandalore, also called the Night of 1,000 Tears. The blood of millions is on his hands. The assault was swift and nearly total. TIE surface assault bombers carpet-bombed the domed cities, shattering the protective enclosures that allowed life to exist on the ruined surface. Sundari, which had survived the war with the Jedi, the Clone Wars, and years of occupation, was reduced to ruins. Everything the new Mandalorians had built over decades of peace was wiped out in hours. The Mandalorian Visual Guide describes how the desert sands were heated so intensely that they turned into glass, leaving much of the surface covered in fused, glittering devastation. Imperial gunships opened fire on fields of recruits, slaughtering warriors who were training to resist the occupation. The Empire specifically targeted their military capacity, making sure that even if some civilians held on, they would have no organized force capable of fighting back. The mines were leveled, both to deny them their source of beskar and to loot whatever remained for Imperial use. Probe droids were sent into the wreckage to hunt down and kill any who remained, making sure the genocide was as thorough as possible. Bo-Katan and her forces were pinned down near the Great Forge during much of the destruction, unable to fight back as their people were caught off guard and unprepared for such a planet-wide assault. They had expected more occupation, more political maneuvering, perhaps another puppet ruler. They had not expected total annihilation. As the assault continued, she made a desperate choice. Gideon offered her terms: surrender and disarm, and the Empire would spare the remaining survivors. Fearing the complete destruction of her people, Bo-Katan gave in. She turned over the Darksaber, surrendering her claim in exchange for a promise that the killing would stop. Gideon betrayed her immediately. The Empire had no intention of sparing anyone. The assault continued without pause, and the genocide proceeded to its end. Her surrender had accomplished nothing except giving Gideon the Darksaber, the symbol of their rule. He kept it as a trophy, a reminder of his victory over a people who had once been among the galaxy's most feared warriors. Survivors believed Mandalore was now uninhabitable, its atmosphere poisoned, its surface cursed. They scattered across the galaxy, hiding their armor and identity, living what the armorer called the existence of sand rats. What the occupiers looted was melted down and stamped with Imperial symbols, creating standard ingots that moved through the black market. When Din Djarin received payment in these ingots, the armorer recognized them as metal taken from those who had died during the Purge. Every piece of Imperial beskar carried the weight of genocide. But not everyone had been on the planet when the bombs fell. One group survived almost intact. They called themselves the Children of the Watch. The Children of the Watch are an orthodox sect following a strict version of the Way. Bo-Katan called them a cult of religious zealots who broke away to follow the ancient way. Because they were on Concordia during the Purge, they survived almost intact. The Armorer, their spiritual leader, later claimed this was proof that their strict following of the Way had protected them from the curse that fell upon those who abandoned the old practices. This view puts the Purge in a troubling light. Claiming it was divine punishment for straying from custom, she reinforces strict obedience to their practices. The message is clear. Those who follow the Way survive. Those who stray are destroyed. This creates powerful pressure on members to conform, since straying is linked not just with personal shame, but with catastrophic results for the entire community. To mainstream followers like Bo-Katan, this view blames the fallen, suggesting the millions who died somehow deserved their fate for not following extreme practices. Their most distinctive rule prohibits removing one's helmet in the presence of any living being. This goes far beyond what mainstream culture practices. Bo-Katan and her followers freely remove their helmets when practical, viewing armor as equipment rather than a sacred object. The children treat helmets as fundamental to identity. To remove one in front of another living being is to commit apostasy, an act that results in immediate exile from the community. When Din Djarin admitted he had removed his helmet before others, Tarre Vizsla immediately called him an apostate and demanded he leave the covert. The armorer confirmed Din was a Mandalorian no more and explained that the only path to redemption was bathing in the living waters beneath the planet's mines, a journey everyone believed was impossible since the world was supposedly uninhabitable. Their system for gaining new members shows how the sect continues across generations. The creed requires warriors to take any abandoned children and either reunite them with their people or raise them as their own. This is how Din became one of them, rescued by Death Watch members during a separatist attack that killed his parents. Foundlings are given the highest priority, with a large portion of collected beskar put toward a communal fund used to create armor when they come of age. Din was raised believing his sect represented normal practice. He had no idea they were considered extreme until he met Bo-Katan and saw her casually remove her helmet. His shock revealed how isolated the children had kept themselves from the broader community. The repeated phrase, "This is the way," reinforces group identity. It ends the discussion and demands acceptance. You do not question the way, you follow it. Karen Travis's Republic Commando novels provide a deeper context for these practices. The reclamation, or 6 actions, defined what it meant to be Mandalorian across thousands of years. Wearing armor, speaking the language, defending oneself and family, raising children in the ways, contributing to the clan's warfare, and rallying to the Mandalore when called. The Children of the Watch appear to follow an extreme interpretation of these principles, adding rules like helmet prohibition that may or may not have been part of the original tenets. What is clear is that reclamation created a framework for identity that went beyond blood and species. Anyone who practiced the 6 actions was considered Mandalorian, regardless of biological origin. This is why Din Djarin, born on another world to non-Mandalorian parents, could become fully one of them through his upbringing. But Din's journey for redemption proved something everyone had believed impossible. The planet was not gone. When he traveled in search of the living waters, he discovered that the atmosphere was breathable. The surface, though devastated, was not the toxic wasteland everyone feared. A small community had lived there since the Purge, holding on to the hope that their people would one day return. The belief that their homeworld was uninhabitable kept them scattered and divided for years. Whether through Imperial misinformation or the lasting trauma of the Purge, this assumption endured long after the Empire itself had fallen, delaying any return. Din won the Black Blade from Moff Gideon through legitimate combat, something Bo-Katan had failed to achieve twice. He had not sought it and did not want it, but by the rules that had governed their politics for 1,000 years, it now belonged to him. When Bo-Katan saw that Din had won it, she could not bring herself to accept it from him, knowing what had happened the last time she received the weapon without earning it. Her followers, seeing that she had failed to win the Darksaber in combat, abandoned her cause. At last, the old customs were finally ending. During the final struggle for Mandalore, Bo-Katan proved herself through actions rather than symbols. she led a coalition of both Children of the Watch and mainstream survivors against Gideon's forces in his hidden base beneath the surface. The blade itself was crushed by Gideon, shattered in his armored fist as Bo-Katan held it. By that point, it had served its purpose. Bo-Katan had finally earned her right to lead through her actions in the battle, proving herself to both the Children of the Watch and the surviving clans. Its destruction freed Mandalore from the cycle of bloodshed it had caused for over a millennium. Leadership could now be earned through actions, rather than possession of a symbol that could only be claimed through violence. Bo-Katan rekindled the Great Forge, and the clans have begun returning. They are building on the bones of millions. Every strength this culture developed became the very weakness that nearly erased them. The armor that protected against blasters could not stop orbital assault. The custom that guaranteed strong leaders handed their throne to a Sith. The creed that had preserved their identity tore them apart when unity mattered most. One uncomfortable truth about Mandalorian history is that much of their suffering was self-inflicted before the Empire ever arrived. Death Watch's terrorism destabilized Satine's pacifist government and made Mandalore vulnerable to outside manipulation. The alliance with Darth Maul brought a Sith Lord to power on the Mandalorian throne. The civil wars between factions killed countless Mandalorians and divided their society into fragments that could never fully reunite. By the time the Empire decided to destroy Mandalore, the Mandalorians had already spent decades destroying themselves. This does not excuse the genocide. The Empire bears full responsibility for the Night of 1,000 Tears and the deaths of millions of innocent people. The Empire did not send Jedi to destroy Mandalore. They sent TIE bombers and stormtroopers and probe droids. The beskar armor that could stop a lightsaber was useless against orbital bombardment. The Vambrace weapons designed to counter force powers were irrelevant against enemies who had no force powers to counter. The Mandalorians had prepared for one kind of war and found themselves fighting another entirely. Yet they proved harder to destroy than the Empire had hoped. The survivors carried their culture across the galaxy, passing down their language, traditions, armor-making techniques, and unbreakable spirit to new generations. Foundlings like Din Djarin were rescued and raised as Mandalorians, ensuring the culture would continue even if the homeworld remained abandoned. By the end of their reclamation, Bo-Katan had led a coalition back to their homeworld, defeated Moff Gideon in the ruins of his secret base, and rekindled the Great Forge that had been the heart of Mandalorian civilization. The planet that was supposed to be uninhabitable was being reclaimed. The people who were supposed to be extinct were rebuilding. The culture that the Empire had tried to erase was reasserting itself. What rises from these ashes will determine whether they finally break the cycle or repeat it all over again.